One of the common questions that we get as pediatricians is, why do we give the vaccines when we do? And then the timing interval between the booster doses. So probably the best way to explain that is actually go through all the different vaccines. Now, the reason for the timing of the vaccine is to give the vaccine before you're actually exposed to the disease. Afterwards, not going to do us much help. So let's just kind of go through them. Hepatitis B, it's given the very first dose at birth. The reason for that is that babies that are exposed to hepatitis B at birth through their mother have been found to have a 90% conversion to chronic hepatitis B. But if you give this at birth, it keeps that from happening. Haemophilus influenza B, mainly a young baby to young child disease. This was the #1 cause of bacterial meningitis prior to the vaccine in kids less than 1. That's the reason it's given at 2 months to begin with. DTaP, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, or whooping cough. Diphtheria historically infected young children. Tetanus we get from dirt, so we want to give it before the baby starts crawling and walking, where they're going to start getting into some dirty wounds. Pertussis, because whooping cough typically caused death in children less than 6 months of age. Polio, historically a virus that infected kids less than 5 years of age, but was especially lethal in small babies. Prevnar is a vaccine against strep pneumonia. #1 cause of bacterial meningitis, bacterial pneumonias, bacterial ear infections, bacterial blood infections, especially high mortality in young babies. Hepatitis A. Hepatitis A is food poisoning, so we want to give this before babies are going to start eating lots of table food, where they might get this from contaminated vegetables. Varicella, or chickenpox, a virus that typically infects preschool and school-aged children. We want to give this before 1, they go to school, and 2, before their older siblings start bringing it home to them. Measles, mumps, and rubella, again, a school-age to preschool illness, affecting mainly kids less than 5. And so we want to give it before they're going to be exposed to it. And the HPV virus, human papillomavirus, a sexually transmitted disease. So we want to give it before the young adolescents become sexually active. So that's the reason for the timing of when they're initially begin. Now, some of them are actually limited because they may not be safe for younger children. So why wouldn't we give some of these at birth instead of starting them at 2 months? Because it's just hard to study young babies. And we want to make sure that it's safe as much as possible. Now, the next question is, why the timing between the different intervals of the boosters? Well, we're going to use this graph, and this is a graph that I draw on the back of sheets all the time for my parents. This side of the graph is going to represent the immunity, how much antibody our body's producing. And this is going to be a timeline over weeks, months, days, whatever. This dotted line represents where the immunity gets high enough that we're no longer going to get disease. Some vaccines we have a very robust response from our immune system, such as when we use a live virus like chickenpox or the measles, mumps, and rubella. Other ones we're using a sugar coating, like with Haemophilus influenza B, where it may take multiple times for us to recognize it thoroughly and for it to last long. So let's look at what they're looking at when they're studying the actual vaccines. When you develop a vaccine, you not only have to develop the vaccine, you have to develop a way of testing the antibody that our body produces against it. So what they do is they give the vaccine and they watch the response of that antibody. And they know where the threshold is where it'll keep it from getting disease. And so it goes up, and then a lot of times it will start to fall. Well, below this level, they know that disease can happen. So they try and give the booster dose here, so that before it crosses that level, you stay above it. And this next vaccine causes an even higher response that may or may not last longer. Before it dips down, you give the next dose so that it can last. And each one of those lasts longer and longer. Now, with the case of the live vaccines, you may have this response that comes up here and lasts a very long time before dipping down. And then you want to give that dose there. Now, this is where altering your vaccine schedule becomes very important. We see that people like to just willy-nilly go, I want to give a vaccine here and I don't want to give the other one for 4 or 5 weeks. Well, that hasn't been tested, and you could see where you might get this response, come down, not give your next one till here, during this period of time, you were able to get that disease. The other thing is, by delaying it, you may not get as robust a response with the immune system that second time. So when you hear people coming up with their own altered vaccine schedule, it's not been tested. These have been thoroughly tested using thousands of test subjects, looking at this antibody response. It's not something that they just put that particular vaccine because it conveniently fit within a well-child exam slot. It's actually been studied to keep you above the level where disease can be caused. So that's the reason that the timing is very important, and why in this country we're seeing large groups of people being exposed to diseases that they're getting in spite of being vaccinated. Make sure if you're going to take the risk of giving your child a vaccine that you get the maximum benefit of that vaccine. And make sure to follow a CDC recommended vaccine guideline. There can be some variations if you choose to change things, or if we need to alter things because of immune system or things like that, but make sure it's something that's been studied and that's going to actually convey immunity to your child.